Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Brandon Z. Hoff with Rudy, Responsible Use of Digital Intelligence, and I just got back from AfroTech. I had the great honor and privilege of being able to be a presenter. Had a couple sessions that I facilitated, but one of the major things that was talked about at this tech conference was agents, and more agents. And so today I want to talk about how you can most effectively orchestrate your agents through something called MCP. And so first and foremost, right, we're going to talk about like what actually is an agent, right? An AI agent, right? An AI agent. I don't want you to overcomplicate this. Because an AI agent is just a large language model with access to tools, right? You have to think of this. Your AI agent has access to tools. Like, that's your core concepts. And then tools, in this case, are APIs, database, or resources that enable actions, right? And so you create an agent that's just Claude or GPT or Gemini or whatever your preference is for large language model, and then you give it access to APIs or database or any kind of resources that can be made actionable. The most efficient way for you to be able to orchestrate this kind of ecosystem is through something called an MCP, right? And many people say, well, what the heck is MCP? And so I'm going to tell you the way that I learned, like, that would help me really understand what MCP is. And so MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. And if we take a moment to just think about this, right? If you think about these analogies that exist, right? FTP is equal to file transfer, right? This is how you transfer files on the internet, through FTP. There's also SMTP, which equals email communication. And then there's also HTTP, which should be very familiar to a lot of people. And so if I go inside and I look at, so if I go into something like YouTube, right? Look at YouTube here, and you see this HTTPS, right? Should look familiar to everybody, but this is the way that the internet communicates, right? So all of these FTP, HTTP, so all of these FTP, SMTP, and HTTP, this is how browsers communication. So if you think of MCP is the way that large language models like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini communicate, right? MCP is a model context protocol, but it's just a method of communication for all of your large language models. And so the foundation, right? The foundation of MCP, right? MCP foundations, right? How to really understand. So you need a client, you need a server, and then you need the protocol. And the client is going to be your LLM. This is going to be your Claude. This is going to be your Gemini, whatever that is. And then the server, this is going to be your data. It's going to be your data sources. And they can be cloud-based or local. Either one. And then your protocol, which is your communication. This is your standardized communication. It could be like in JSON format or however it is, whatever the structure of the way that your large language model communicates, right? You have to be able to say this. And so there's a couple ways that you can do this. There's a couple ways you can do this for implementation, right? What does practical implementation look like? Implementation. Pardon my spelling. I'm not using Grammarly, so my spelling might be pretty bad here. And so you can host it on something like N8N, or you can do in like Railway, Vercel, right? You can have some kind of cloud hosting provider, or you can do local, right? As we mentioned. And so in this case, I'm going to show you how you can use Claude. And in this case, we're going to use Claude. Claude is going to be our client. Vercel, in my case, is my host. Claude is my client. And then the protocol, the communication method, I'm going to show you what that looks like inside of the code. And so here's a real world example, right? I was at AfroTech, and I was taking a lot of contacts, right? I got a lot of business cards. Let's see. And so I had a lot of like business cards that I collected. As you can see here, I have hundreds of LinkedIn connections that I was able to make. And of course, it's a challenge to be able to manage all of these different contacts. And so I'm going to show you inside of my ChatGPT, because we're going to show you how I started. And then I learned about this MCP and I'm like, whoa, this is going to really change the way that you operate. And so let's go into, let's see if we can search, and we can say workflow. And so here's my ChatGPT. I started in ChatGPT. I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top because this is what I was doing at first. I said, hey, could you be a relationship intelligence workflow? And so I was meeting people, and then I was asking ChatGPT, hey, can you output this into a TSV so that I can easily then copy and paste this into Microsoft Excel. And so when you get here, I'm going to delete this all. And you can see I can just copy in name, company, role, how we met, connection type, follow-up action, status, etc. Right? Pretty simple. And then as I meet people, I was just copying and pasting all of this into my Excel sheet. And so this started to be my CRM, if you could think of it this way. And so as I started to meet people, you'll see, like, as throughout the conference, it started to grow. You see, I was meeting people, and here's a person on LinkedIn that I met. And then here's a person, there's a business card or a screenshot. There's another business card. And so you can see that my CRM was beginning to grow, right? It was beginning to grow. And I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way that I can do this. And so, of course, I learned about agents in MCP. And I'm like, man, you could build an MCP server. And Claude can automatically do this for you. Claude can automatically take your contacts and then put this into a spreadsheet or into a database automatically. And I'm like, whoa, that sounds superior. And so check this out, right? I have all these contacts. I'm going to take these contacts. I'm going to go into Claude, and then I'm going to show you how you can begin to set up your MCP. And so we're going to put on Sonnet for this case. And so inside of here, if you go into your connectors, right, you see this contacts CRM. This is the MCP server that I built to be able to manage the contacts for my CRM. And so I'm going to add connectors, and there's plenty of different types of connectors here that exist. And we're going to manage connectors. And so I'll come in here and you can see this custom contacts, right? This is my contacts. You can see where it's hosted, right? This is where I'm hosting. I'm using Vercel to be able to host it. I can configure this, and you can see the tools that I have here. And so this is what it looks like on the back end inside of Claude, inside of all of your connectors, right? And first we're going to ask Claude. Sometimes I just double check to see if Claude's connected. Are you connected to the MCP CRM in your connectors? I just want to verify that Claude knows what I'm talking about, because I can see I have access to context exactly. And then so Claude verifies what tools it has. And so it can manage the contacts, it can query what kind of contacts, it can do the search, it can do the context follow-up, contacts delete. Because remember, you have to have access to tools, right? An agent is just a large language model with access to tools. And one of the ways to be able to orchestrate and manage your tools is through an MCP. And so Claude has access. I want to add these contacts to my CRM. And so I paste the contacts in there. And so what Claude's going to do is extract all of these contacts, right? It's extracting all the contacts from there as it does ordinarily. And then it says, let me process this. And now you can see Claude is doing all of these here. And once it extracts all of it here, it's asking for access to how it can then upload or append these to our CRM. And so we're going to let this load for a minute. This is the proper, so you can see here, when we talked about communication, right? This is the communication protocol. This is the way that it communicates. And so it's in JSON, so it's going to extract name, company, role, how we met, the connection type, the follow-up action, and then the status, right? These are all the communication protocols that exist inside of the code that Claude is checking from. And so I can press allow, and then you'll see here where Claude then says, okay, I'm adding all of these contacts to your CRM. Perfect. I've added 14 contacts to your CRM. You can be able to see that. They're mostly from AfroTech, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll just go double check because I'm using Supabase as my, instead of using Microsoft Excel, like before we were using Excel to be able to add our contacts And now you can see we can do this in Supabase, and Claude has access to our Supabase, and it can add these to our contacts. And so as you can see here, there's an infinite amount of ways that you can configure this. Like right now, I just have my Supabase and Vercel, and I use Claude code to be able to assemble this. But imagine if then, I had a Gmail MCP and then a calendar MCP, or any other MCP to be able to say, look at the last time I communicated with this client and draft me an email and then send that email to this client. But the question you may be asking, like, well, what does this really look like inside of the code, right? How does this look inside of the code? And I'm glad you asked, because one of the things that you can do to help facilitate this process, right? We went inside some of the back end parts of Claude, but you can go inside of settings. And if you go into connectors, maybe capabilities. Okay, if you go inside of capabilities, inside of Claude, you scroll down, you'll see these skills, all of these skills that Claude is using. One of the skills is an MCP builder, right? MCP builder. I don't have mine turned on, but this is something that you can use. If you're in Cursor AI or if you're in Claude Code, this is really sets the foundation for you to be able to build your own MCP server, right? Then you just have to have your cloud server. You can do it on your computer, but this is the foundation. And so you can go and you can try it in the chat and you can turn this on. Or if you did, I'll show you what I did. You can go into GitHub and you can search for Claude skills. Actually don't know if that's the best way. Claude skills, GitHub. All right, public repository for skills. And so here's the entire code for all those skills that we just saw inside of Claude's settings on the back end of your Claude, if you're using Claude. And so you can go to MCP Builder. I actually just took it and I downloaded all of the MCP. And I'm going to show you what this looks like inside of our, I'm using Cursor, or if you're using VS Code, right? I'm actually using Cursor here. And so if you go inside of your, let's see where we're at. We're in My Drive, Dev, Projects, Repos, and Skills. And so then you can see your MCP builder. And so right here is your MCP builder. And then here's all the ways, right? MCP best practices. And of course you can ask Cursor or Claude Code to be able to review any of the contents that exist inside of this MCP builder and then help you build your own MCP. And so I use this as the foundation for being able to understand how to build my own MCP server. And so if you go down, if I go down to MCP servers here, and if I go to the README that exists inside of our contacts CRM, you see the README, you'll be able to see everything that I did in being able to set up this MCP server in using Vercel, Supabase, and Claude. And so all of this is documented here. I'll be able to link this to GitHub. It's open source. It's inside of my GitHub called PromptStack. But here's all of the different details, and you can see the tools that we have access to. Contact managements, contact queries, contact search, contact follow-up, contacts, deletes. And so all of this can happen inside of Claude. Claude really operates as kind of like your conversational layer or middleware to all of the tools that you have. Also, I forgot I use Clerk. And so here's my stack, right? Supabase, I use Clerk as my OAuth provider, and then I configure the environment, and then I connected it. You can connect it to ChatGPT or Claude. I will say that Claude just is not as buggy as it was with ChatGPT. So you can walk through this. And so that's really the gist of how you can set up your own MCP server, and then also a use case for how you can use it. Contact CRM. For me, I was using it as a contact CRM from AfroTech, and now I'm probably going to rig up a Gmail MCP just to be able to then work on messages and correspondence for all of my contacts. And so I hope this has been really helpful. If you have any questions about agents or MCP servers or anything like that, you can leave a comment inside of the leave a comment, and I'll be sure to be able to respond to your comment. Also, if you're interested, and being a part of an AI builders community. I'm working on that, Rudy, responsible use of digital intelligence. You can go sign up on the email list to be able to be notified of when that announcement drops. Also be doing some virtual meetups, because I think this is just a really important time for us to be able to share the information that we're having. One of the wonderful things about AfroTech was just the exchange of information, the exchange of intelligence, I should say, in terms of what people are building and what people are doing. But thanks for watching. Again, this is Brandon Z. Hoff with Rudy, responsible use of digital intelligence, signing off. Peace, y'all.